probably like Formula E on steroids.
For us, this is an unbelievable turnaround.
Listen, guys, the F1 world is literally on fire right now, and Max Verstappen is right in the middle of all of it. We are talking a bombshell swap rumor that could shake the entire driver market. A former F1 driver actually calling for Max to be banned from racing, and a 360-degree spin that had the whole paddock arguing for days. Plus, his Red Bull is going through a secret transformation, and Canada is just around the corner. Stay with me because this video is going to be wild. Let's break it down, but before, if you want more updates and news on Max, then hit that like button and subscribe for more breakdowns. The swap rumor, Verstappen to McLaren? Okay, so let's start with the biggest story circulating in the paddock right now, and honestly, this one is genuinely shocking. Max Verstappen's longtime race engineer Gianpiero Lambiase has announced he is leaving Red Bull and heading to McLaren. Now here is where it gets interesting, because Max has said publicly that if Lambiase leaves, he leaves too. So the question everyone is asking is, where does Max go? And former F1 driver Ralf Schumacher has thrown a massive name into the conversation. He is saying that Verstappen could follow Lambiase directly to McLaren, which would then trigger Oscar Piastri moving over to Red Bull. Basically a full driver swap between the two biggest teams on the grid right now. And when you think about it, the logic actually makes sense, because McLaren has the best engine on the grid, the car is fast, and Max needs a winning machine desperately right now. On top of that, there are reports of an exit clause in Max's Red Bull contract that could be triggered if he is not inside the top two by the summer break. And looking at his current P7 in the standings, that clause is starting to look very, very real. The race ban controversy, Montoya versus Max. Now, speaking of people coming after Max, hold on, because this next story is something else entirely. Juan Pablo Montoya, yes, the former F1 driver, actually went on the BBC Checkered Flag podcast and called for the FIA to essentially park Max Verstappen. His argument is that Max has been too disrespectful in the way he talks about Formula One and the 2026 regulations. Montoya suggested adding 7 or 8 penalty points directly to Max's super license just for his public comments. Now, for context, you only need 12 points to get an automatic race ban, and Max already has 3 points on his license from last year. So if Montoya had his way, Max would be sitting on the edge of a suspension basically overnight. Max has been calling the 2026 cars things like Mario Kart and Formula E on steroids. And Montoya is saying that kind of language is disrespectful to the sport that pays your bills. But here's the thing a lot of fans are pointing out. Montoya and Helmut Marko, who was a close Verstappen ally, have a very long history of not getting along. So make of that what you will. The Miami spin, skill or pure luck? Alright, now let's talk about what actually happened on track in Miami, because this debate is still going strong. Max started P2 on the grid and went for the lead into turn 2, battling Charles Leclerc. Leclerc cut back underneath him, and Max completely lost the rear, doing a full 360-degree spin right in front of the entire pack. It looked absolutely terrifying, and somehow he kept the car going without hitting anyone. Martin Brundle called the recovery genius. Others said it was just physics doing the work, and Max got lucky that nobody collected him. Max himself was honest about it on team radio, apologizing to his engineers and later telling media that he simply oversteered and he is just human. From there, the story gets even better, because when the safety car came out due to a Hajar crash, Red Bull gambled on an early pit stop, putting Max on hard tires and dropping him all the way back to P16. He then carved his way back through the field, eventually finishing P5 after Leclerc picked up a massive 20-second penalty on the final lap. The result was Max's best of the entire 2026 season so far. Red Bull's secret weight loss program. Now here is something that does not get talked about enough, and it is actually a really big deal for Max's chances going forward. Red Bull started the 2026 season with the RB22 sitting around 12 kilograms over the minimum weight limit. In Formula One terms, that is absolutely massive because it costs you roughly 0.3 of a second every single lap. For Miami, they brought what can only be described as a B-spec version of the car, completely overhauling the front wing, side pods, floor, diffuser, rear wing, and even the steering rack. They managed to cut that weight excess roughly in half. The steering rack fix in particular was massive for Max because he had been complaining about the steering feel since the very first test in Barcelona. The next weight reduction package is planned for the European races, targeting the Austrian or British Grand Prix with the goal of hitting the minimum weight of 768 kilograms. Max on the rules. Better, but still not happy. So with all these upgrades and the FIA's rule tweaks coming into Miami, you would think Max softened his stance a little bit, right? Well, kind of, but not really. The FIA reduced qualifying energy harvesting and increased the super clipping limit, and drivers generally agreed qualifying felt more like proper F1. But Max was still not satisfied. He said after the race that what he said before about the regulations is still exactly the same, and that the sport is still punishing you for going fast through corners because you lose energy on the next straight. His exact words were that it is still not how he would like to see it. He called the tweaks a tickle before the weekend, and after racing in Miami, his view basically has not changed. What happens in Canada? So now all eyes shift to the Canadian Grand Prix at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve in Montreal, happening from May 22nd to 24th. And this one is a sprint weekend on top of everything else, so there is going to be even more action-packed into those 3 days. The circuit itself suits a driver like Max really well because it is a stop-start layout with heavy braking zones, which is exactly where driver confidence and raw talent can make a big difference, even if the car is not perfect. The bad news for Red Bull is that Mercedes is bringing upgrades to Canada, while Red Bull is only bringing a small step, with the bigger package saved for Europe. What happens next? So to wrap everything up, we had the massive McLaren swap rumor driven by Lambiassi's departure, Montoya calling for Max to literally be parked by the FIA, a Miami spin that split the paddock right down the middle, a significant Red Bull technical upgrade, Max still unhappy with the regulations despite the tweaks, and Canada coming up fast as the next big test. Personally, I think the swap rumor is the one story that is going to define this entire season, because if Max genuinely triggers that exit clause, nothing in F1 will ever be the same again. But here is the question I want you to think about. If Verstappen actually moves to McLaren, does that make him the favorite for the title immediately, or does the Mercedes pace make that impossible?